Hello, my name is Althea Learson, the CEO of Leadership Buffalo. I'm here to welcome you to our new podcast, Connections. We'd like to thank Lolly Insurance for sponsoring this series for us. At Leadership Buffalo, we are on a mission to connect people and inspire change. Each month, we will connect with the people that make our community the vibrant, resilient, and beautiful region we call home. Along the way, we'll be having candid and sometimes challenging discussions and stepping outside of our comfort zones in the hope that we can grow alongside our city. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy.
Welcome back to Connections. My name is Sean Ryan. I am the Communication and Program Manager here at Leadership Buffalo, and this month we wanted to sit down and talk about mental health, as May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. We brought in Liz Hull from Horizon Health Services. We hope you enjoy. Good morning. How you doing, Liz?
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me.
We're super excited to have you. Could you just introduce yourself and tell us where you work and what you do?
Absolutely. I'm Liz Hull. I am a clinical social worker. I work at Horizon Health Services, and right now I oversee outpatient operations.
So what does that look like? Can you tell us more about what it is that you do?
Well, first and foremost, I like to say I'm a clinician. I still see clients. That's what got me into this field, is just the love of people and wanting to help people to understand what makes people tick, what they need to be successful to meet their goals. So that's my primary passion. In this role, what I help to do is supervise the supervisors in each of the clinics. So mostly from an operations perspective, meaning helping out with hiring and helping make the position of counselor a really rewarding position, making things efficient so that we can best serve our clients.
And that's no small feat, right? It's my understanding that you have a large amount of counselors and you cover a large portion of Western New York, correct?
We have somewhere around 200 clinicians in outpatient, so we're pretty large.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, we have clinics in 3 counties, so we're in Erie, Niagara, and Genesee County. In addition to counseling in those clinics, we also provide therapy now in schools, so we're working with students in various school districts to help support their mental well-being and to give them easier access to come right to them to be right in schools.
So your passion is what drove you to do this work. What drove you to do it here in Buffalo, New York?
It's a great question. I'm from Buffalo, born and raised. I absolutely adore Buffalo. I adore my Buffalo Bills. I went to Canisius College. I actually studied business for my first 2 years. I absolutely loved business, but I felt like something was missing. I felt like I wanted more of a people connection. And so I ended up transitioning to be a psychology major. When I graduated, I got a position working in inpatient psychiatry in Brooklyn. So I moved, packed up and moved from Buffalo and lived in New York for about 2.5 years. I really loved it. I loved having that opportunity, but I missed my community. I think Buffalo is a wonderful place to live and work. It's a city of good neighbors for a reason, and so I came back here to get my master's and found an excellent home at Horizon, where I've been now for 9 years.
9 years is no small feat, especially in today's era of the Great Resignation, and I mean, especially doing the type of work that you're doing, there's a large risk of burnout. So what has kept you going those 9 years, and why do you stay in this field and do this work?
Our mission is what brought me in, but it's also what's kept me. In addition to our culture, of course, that's a huge piece of why I stay at Horizon. But our mission is really to serve the underserved. It's to work with anybody who's dealing with any sort of mental health challenge or substance use disorder. And who among us hasn't faced something like that, either personally or within our family or our friends. And so knowing that we have access to resources, we have therapists who can treat people, we have counselors trained in a variety of specific interventions, whether that be working with pregnant and postpartum women, working with psychosis, working with racial trauma, or as I mentioned earlier, our youngest populations, working with students, working with young kiddos from 3 years old through the lifespan. Everyone really can be served coming through our doors.
I mean, that's just incredible to have a place like that here in our hometown. So for those of us that might not be as aware of what is going on in this field and in this work, can you tell us what you see as the biggest impacts on our community today, and what are some of the hurdles that people are facing in terms of mental health in our region?
I think we're seeing things in Buffalo that mimic national trends. So we're seeing an uptick in alcohol use. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has kept people home. It's increased isolation. It's led to disconnection. And so people have really gotten to a place of looking for that dopamine surge, that feel-good feeling in other places. When they're not out with friends and family enjoying things, they've turned to other means to achieve that. So we're seeing alcohol use, we're still seeing opiate use throughout our community, and we offer medication-assisted treatment, lots of harm reduction options to help people reduce or stop using if that's their goal. Additionally, especially with our students, we're seeing a lot of school avoidance. Kiddos who are afraid to go to school, who are having panic attacks at the thought of going to school. And again, a lot of that has gotten worse after the pandemic. And so it's something we're really trying to target by offering services both in our clinics and in schools. I think we're also still reeling from the tragedy of May 14th, the racial attack that happened at TOPS. We're seeing a community that's still trying to heal and is still grieving.
I mean, dealing with trauma and grief are not easy feats. We here in Buffalo have experienced, over the past couple of years, extreme amounts of trauma. I mean, with the blizzard and the terrorist attack at the Tops on Jefferson, and just the realities of living through a pandemic. People are walking around each day with so much, but there are places like Horizon to go and heal. But I feel like sometimes people bottle it up. They view it as their own struggle to deal with. What would you say to those people who are maybe adverse to seeking help, or feel as though it's a admission of weakness, or what would you say to those people who are contemplating reaching out and getting help and getting services to heal and to grieve and to grow? What would you say to them?
I would say the first step to any type of healing is connection. And I would want people to know that therapy is a place where you get unconditional care and acceptance, where you get non-judgmental treatment, where you get empathy, where you can be yourself, and in a completely confidential way. And who couldn't benefit from that?
I mean, I most certainly do, and plenty of the people I hold most dear in my life have received immense amount of love and support through counseling and seeing a therapist. And to kind of tie it in, here at Leadership Buffalo, we value the importance of personal growth, and we know that if you're not well, you can't lead well. But we also have a responsibility as leaders to propel this work and to make sure that our community is healthy. So what can organizations or local community leaders do to elevate this work, to build a healthier community?
I think employers have to hold space to hear what their employees are feeling and what they're looking for. So from the employment perspective, I think from a community perspective, we have to allow this gradual return to being out again. I think people fall into different camps. Some people are ready to rush out and be back together, and others are trepidatious. Others have really become comfortable in a more isolative environment. I think people have been driven to more of social media, more of online connection rather than that face-to-face connection. And we desperately, as humans, need face-to-face connection. We are not a species that can survive and thrive in isolation. And so I think it's about checking on your neighbor. It's the little things. Being outside in nature, practicing mindfulness, which is the ability to be in the present moment without judgment. It's those small moments that are important to getting back to life, I guess, as usual, with still understanding. We need to pay attention to public health, and we need to stay home when we're sick. We need to wash our hands and do all the things we learned from this pandemic.
You mentioned mindfulness, and I feel like there is so much to be said for that. There's a wonderful graduate of Leadership Buffalo. Her name is Lindsay Amico, and she coaches mindfulness. And she came in a couple of weeks ago and talked to our high school students, and it blew my mind. I mean, it instantly made me feel better. And I took some of the things that she was talking about just sitting in a moment, taking something that you do every single day, like the example that she used was showering. And usually when I'm in the shower, I'm thinking about 8 billion different things, right? Like, when am I gonna get my coffee, and how much gas is in my tank, and the laundry that's not folded, and I'm not really existing in that moment. And I started doing that. I started just being present with those droplets of water hitting my face and the smell of my soap, and using those 5 senses, and I started feeling better immediately, and my mornings got more enjoyable, and I started really sinking into those moments, and it works. It really works. But I don't think we're taught to value that as a culture. We're just pushed constantly to be thinking and going. But
that's exactly right. I think as a society, we have been so accustomed to rush to the next thing, to be productive, act quickly, move on, and you lose the value of that moment. You realize you're never really living in the present. So I'm a mom. I have twins who are almost 4 years old, and sometimes it can feel like a slog, like, the kitchen needs to be cleaned again. Laundry needs to be folded, the next thing. And so I've really had to reframe my own mindset toward those what seem like mundane tasks of how can I throw on a podcast while I'm doing the dishes, feel the feeling of warm water on my hands, breathe deeply as I'm washing the dishes. It sounds maybe silly, but the amount of enjoyment you can get from a small task like that, if you shift your mindset and you practice mindfulness, is huge, because these moments are the moments of our life.
That's exactly what they are. And if we let them pass us by, then what is a life worth living, right? But like we said, it's not inherent in us. It's not ingrained into our daily lives to acknowledge this reality and the importance of mental health. Why is that? Like, I want you to answer this question of like, why is this? It's a huge question, but I guess the more specific question I have for you is, what are the misconceptions surrounding mental health and the importance of taking care of that part of yourself?
I think the biggest number one misconception is that people with a mental health disorder are dangerous. When I'm consuming media and I'm watching the news, I'm often sitting at home cringing because a violent incident will happen, and the first thing that's mentioned is, well, this person likely has a mental health disorder. This is a product of mental illness. And the reality, the data show us that people with mental health disorders are far more likely to harm themselves than someone else. And so I think we need to consume media responsibly. We need to challenge the things that we hear and educate those around us.
I mean, let's talk about that. The idea that the language that we use as people of influence in our spheres has a profound effect on the well-being and the elevation and the support of communities and marginalized individuals. And, you know, if we're bosses, our employees and our direct reports, and if we're parents, our children, is that something that you all focus on in terms of kind of dismantling any misconceptions or stigma? Is the language that we use, is it that important?
Yes, language is everything. We talk about this on our teams at work all the time. Language matters, the way we speak to each other. If we make a microaggression, we have to notice it and recognize it. I saw a wonderful training recently where the presenter talked about using the word ouch. If someone makes a microaggression or says something that hurts you, it's a really honest way to acknowledge that pain, and it's an opportunity for a restorative moment for that person who maybe said that hurtful thing to ask more, to apologize, to learn from that experience. So those are all things as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion department that we're really trying to put forth as an organization and model that for our community.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredibly impactful and empowering work, right? To identify what role can your organization play in dismantling a system that has been missing voices at the table, right? But what can we do as individuals, right? Apart from our identities as business leaders or, you know, XYZ, what can we do in our own lives to start to heal the world, start to build a mentally strong community?
I think it starts at the micro level. And what I mean by that is it starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with you who are out there listening to this right now. We have to get back to connection. We have to get back to a space of listening to our neighbor, understanding their perspective, even if we disagree with it. We have lost the ability to have healthy discourse, to care for one another, to educate one another. And I think as wonderful as social media has been, as wonderful as technology is, we can reach now patients through telehealth, which is fantastic. I think the cost to some of this is we've lost that in-person connection.
I I guess the irony isn't lost on me. We're here on the Connections podcast, and you and I are sitting down in person and having this really incredible moment together, and people will be tuning in virtually to be a part of this moment. But the reality is that there is ups and downs to this incredible tool that we have called the internet. I was reading a study that young women who spend time online, whatever specific social media site it was, I cannot remember, but young women who spend a lot of time on those sites experience depression at higher rates than their counterparts who do not spend time on those social media avenues. And I guess we have to try and navigate that as best we can, and that's a discussion for another time. In the meantime, I want you to share with us and share with our listeners what gives you hope, what inspires you.
Young people always give me hope. Young people are leading the way in talking about their mental well-being. I think about when I was in school, when I was in high school, we didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about anxiety. I remember sitting in a classroom in high school hearing about 9/11, hearing about planes flying into the Twin Towers, and I remember seeing fear on people's faces. And nobody knew what to do or how to respond. There were no services, there were no discussions about here's someone to talk to, here's a place to ask questions, have questions answered. Now, I think young people are really leading the way in terms of raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm not okay. I'm being bullied, or I'm seeing bullying happen. I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I don't want to go to school. We are seeing students really be at the forefront of asking for help, and that's part of the reason we're being asked by many school districts to come in and provide additional services. So I think students are modeling, even for their parents in some cases, the need to take care of your mental well-being. And so I think stigma is reducing. And there's still a lot of work to do.
It is truly remarkable, these students. I know that we both met Luke Lippett, who's a student here in Buffalo, who is just, I think, one of the prime examples of young people refusing to settle. They're refusing to take tradition as what has to be.
Yes.
He's
a great example. And going back to what I've been saying all along about connection, he was willing to raise his hand and create connection in a different way, to sit in a school board meeting and to give a student's perspective is exactly the kind of in-person, face-to-face, healthy conversation, disagreement that we need to grow as a society.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Liz.
All right, before I let you go, I gotta ask, what is your favorite aspect about Buffalo? What's your favorite thing about Buffalo?
Oh my goodness, well, I am a big sports fan, so I have to say my Buffalo Bills.
Go Bills!
Also love the Sabres, but nothing can replace my Bills.
No, yeah.
Love our food.
Some of the best food.
And love our Four Seasons.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Liz. We appreciate it. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Well, that does it for this month's episode of the Connections podcast from Leadership Buffalo. We would like to again thank our sponsors over at Lolly Insurance for making this happen. And again, a huge thank you to Liz Hull from Horizon Health Services for joining us today. Make sure you come back next month as we sit down with Richard Ridenour from Evergreen Health and talk about all things pride. Thank you for joining us today. Hope to see you next time.